Hello, I'm author Wendy Sloan. I'm the author of the book, The Love Energy Thread, Connecting Self, Community, and Dimensions. First part on self. It's a book about health and healing and how to move forward with your life and create goals. The second book I'm working on is called Enough, Shining the Light on the Rats while keeping your joy. So I just want to show some of the books that I've used as reference materials. Of course, there's been a lot of YouTubes, a lot of in-depth conversations with people, and let me just show you some of the books. The history of our country is very important. We have Benjamin Franklin. Is Benjamin Franklin all that he has been purported to be? Or is there kind of a sly side to the man? George Washington, Rules of Civility. Did you know he had such a little pamphlet? He had morals and codes about how to live one's life and deal with one's fellow man. One person that we could say maybe got slighted in history is Richard Henry Lee. He was one of the first founding fathers. Did you know that it was really the conversation over breakfast that he had at his sister's house in Philadelphia for the first Continental Congress between him and John Adams that really formed a partnership, a bond, and helped to propel some of the writings and some of the plans of this country. So don't be surprised sometimes when you meet a new friend that when you have great conversations, who knows where those conversations can lead, where it can lead to. Matter of fact, his son gave birth to a baby 3 or 4 days after he had passed, and his grandson collected all the writings of Richard Henry Lee and wrote a book so that we have record of his influence and his writing and his diplomacy. Did you know that he was good friends with George Washington? Actually, his dad and George Washington's father, Augustus, were best friends. They had a plantation next to each other, and it was when Augusta took his second wife after the first wife died that the family later moved to Ferry Farms, and he got into the ironworks business there. It was at the death of Augustus's father that George Washington then was mentored by Lord Fairfax, chicken-winged him underneath his wing and taught him and gave him opportunities. George Washington was sent out to survey lands in the east and west of the Ohio River. Just as an aside, the Constitution, the Hillsdale College is asking for donations for printing booklets that can be sent to school children. I just happened to get that recently in the mail. There's an interesting story that this book, Unlikely Allies, has about the merchant, a playwright, a spy that saved the American Revolution. Now we know that Arthur Lee and William Lee were diplomats, and it was really Arthur Lee that first approached the French to give money for the American Revolution. But that's why then a team, Silas Deane and Benjamin Franklin, went over and worked with Arthur Lee. There was a scandal about some shenanigans about money and not keeping very good records with Silas Deane, which he later was exonerated. But he never did prove or produce the receipts, as you can say. Interesting book that Sarah Vowell did, Lafayette, in the somewhat United States. It really tells the tale of how Lafayette came to America and hooked up with George Washington, and he was so honored that when he came back for his visit, many people came to hear him speak and threw parties for him. Matter of fact, the Lee family threw a party for him at 2 different plantations that they had a walkway with guided lights between the 2 homes. That's also a little bit about Lafayette is talked about in Unlikely Allies, because his family did not want him to come to the United States. But yet, being a Freemason, he got the pull to allow himself. He was strong-willed, and he decided he wanted to come where the action was. And he was a great supporter of George Washington and friend. An interesting story, that this gentleman here, George Peabody, was born in 1798, give or take a year. We're just going through my memories. I have no cue cards here, it's just ad-libbing. So please forgive me if some of my facts are just a little bit off. The energy is all true, but the facts may be off just a teeny bit. But George Peabody threw a 4th of July party in London. He wasn't rich growing up, but he was able to learn about trade, and he helped get bonds for the railroads at one time, but he was helping to finance some of the money interest. And we're talking about the year 1811, 1812, and the 1820s, where at one time he just decided, he had gone back and forth to London a few times, and he decided to stay in London for a period of time, and he became quite a celebrity. But he was influential of kind of healing some of the wounds, the business wounds between the American merchants and the British merchants. And side fact, he was the one that trained or gave his business over, took in a business partner late in life when his health was failing a little bit, with Julius Morgan. That sounds familiar, that name. It's because that's J.P. Morgan's father. J.P. Morgan knew George Peabody, and actually he helped pack and get some of his materials ready for for George Peabody's trip back to the United States late in life. He was over 60 when he came back, and he was praised, and a lot of parties were thrown in his honor. Although he kind of was a quiet type of gentleman, he didn't like really big parties, but some small little parties where he could do business. Now, a person that everybody here in America knows is Mark Twain. Who really was Mark Twain? Did you know that he had a family, 3 daughters? The first daughter, Susie Clemens, actually wrote a book, Papa, Intimate Biography of Mark Twain. Very interesting. My last trip, we actually went to Hartford, Connecticut, and toured his famous kind of clock-looking house there in Hartford, Connecticut. He also wrote a book, Mark Twain did, well, this is Stephen Kinzer's book about Mark Twain, but did you know that he had a conflict, whether it was true or not, or whether it was just one of those make-believe fights between himself and Teddy Roosevelt about the United States and our role? Should we be going to war? Should we become like England, a conquest of nations? So that was a discussion that was talked about, discussed publicly in the papers. This book about him, A Family Sketch and Other Private Writings, this is Mark Twain, and this is Susie Clemens. And I have a question. Did she really die of meningitis while the family was away in Europe? Or was there something nefarious going on? I don't know. I'm kind of curious about that. Switching gears, many of us are wondering, how did the medical system that we're living under right now, some people call it medical mafia, how did it begin when women were in charge of herbs and healing people in communities, and there were a lot of natural treatments that really worked well for people? How did we get the type of system that we have today? This book here, Rockefeller Medicine Man, explains that. Because there was a gentleman, it's kind of ironic, his name, Frederick T. Gates. I don't believe he's any connection to the Gates that we all know from Microsoft and has opinions about viruses. I don't believe, or maybe somebody else needs to do some more research, maybe the distant cousin, I don't know, but I haven't found a link between the two. But anyway, Frederick T. Gates was the person that John D. Rockefeller used to form his different foundations, such as he helped with the start of the University of Chicago, and he started the medical complex there in New York on medical research. And we also know that John D. Rockefeller also donated money to a Black women's Baptist college, the Spelman College in Georgia. So it's very interesting how the rich decide to use their extra money, because they don't want to pay taxes on it. They create foundations. And through this book, I discovered coming back to George Peabody, because he was one of the leading people that Frederick T. Gates looked to for advice. How did he spend his money? Because George Peabody donated a lot of money in his lifetime. And then also Frederick T. Gates also looked at how Carnegie spent his money, how he gave it away, and his advisors. So there's an influence that sometimes positive, sometimes negative, that these foundations kind of lean on each other to see how money is being spent. This book here, Sidney Kirkpatrick, it's interesting how I found him. I had a flyer from a workshop that I was going to, or was interested in attaining in Florida. He also wrote a book about Edgar Cayce that I have since read. There's an aside about Edgar Cayce. He actually gave readings for Tesla and Edison. And he also was called upon different people in the White House around the time of Roosevelt. Now, this book here, Hitler's Holy Relics, what I read about this was very interesting. It's a story of the art and the crown jewels and the Spear of Destiny. They were taken out of safekeeping and they were put in another location. So an art teacher from, I believe it was California, it was his job, he was part of the military, he was assigned even a task that was higher than his initial rank. And I wish I could remember, maybe it's right on the back cover here. Quickly, to give this person credit. Well, I guess we'll have to do a little bit more research. You can look up the book and find who the person was that led this team looking for the crown jewels and the Spear of Destiny. And when they did find it, they found out that the crown jewels were all legitimate, but the Spear of Destiny wasn't the real true Spear of Destiny. So it kind of gives pause to think, does somebody else have the Spear of Destiny, or where did it go? And then also, was the Third Reich going to come back at another time to the Fourth Reich and use these symbols? Because symbols throughout history are very important because there's an energy attached to it. And whether it's true or not, there's groups of people that believe in the power of these symbols. So that's just a question for research. I haven't found the answer to that, but it's very interesting. Oh, another thing. If you're one of those what people call woo-woo people too, there's a crossover. Did you know that Hitler actually had a band of men that actually used divining rods? A little bit more research. He used a lot of the mystical or occult in his work. Did you know that really occult doesn't mean like bad, satanic, Luciferian? It could go down that path, but it also means just hidden. Are there hidden secrets that would benefit mankind? Are there a group of people that have hidden these secrets? I wonder. Talking about secrets, one of the biggest secrets is the MK Ultra program. There are people that were part of that program, victims of that program, and you could really say white slavery part of that program because they were never paid for their services to the United States government. There's Kathy O'Brien's book, 2 books. She's wrote a book on healing this issue, PSTD, the time for healing, that she gives tips for those who are kind of awakening how they've been used by our government. And also another author, Bryce Taylor, Thanks for the Memories. So it's very interesting. She claims that she was a personal computer basically for Henry Kissinger. He used her as a tape recorder at meetings, and then also she was used by Bob Hope. Very interesting book. I'll say the tagline here: The Memories of Bob Hope's and Henry Kissinger's Mind Control Slave, used as a presidential sex slave and personal computer. So here at the Osprey Nation, George Webb's Neighborhood News Network, we use the term Oconus lore, but actually there was a term that was originally used with MK Ultra as presidential model, or kitten. Now, I have to page turn to one part. There's so many references. You can look at this as maybe a healer and thinking like, you know, can I help these people? Listening to some of the stories and how they mind controlled her. Or you can read it again and come up with political facts that she was involved in. Or even nowadays, there's a section on, and somebody moved my page, back a few, to the WHO. Who's the WHO? The World Health Organization. Do you know that she claimed that she was there as a tape recorder and that the WHO isn't exactly what we think it is? Meaning that people aren't there trying to improve the world's health, but more it was an avenue or cover for secret meetings. She talks a little bit about those meetings. She doesn't give all the details, but it's a very interesting read. And when you see the pattern between the experience of Bryce Taylor or Kathy O'Brien and this next person, Kathleen Sullivan, it gives you pause to think when you see these patterns. It seems they were all groomed the same way. And Kathleen Sullivan makes a comment that makes me think that perhaps not all those MK Ultra files were destroyed as was previously stated. Another interesting book, if you really want to learn about intelligence and how things are done, is the Tavistock Institute, Social Engineering the Masses by Daniel Estlin. Very interesting read. The Inheritance, there's an interesting story in here about a watch that ended up going for sale. And actually Donald Trump, in his Trump Tower, he housed a lot of, or displayed a lot of the papers, also artifacts of JFK that went up for sale. It was one of those companies, maybe it was Sotheby's, that ran the auction. But this watch has an interesting story because the CIA came, or not CIA, the Secret Service came and took all of his jewelry to scan it and clean it. So he left the hotel room without his watch. Well, Jackie in her purse had another watch that she had just had a new band put on it. And so she gave him, when he didn't know what time it was, she gave him this watch. So this is the watch that went up for sale. And according to this book, there was bids even by the Queen for the watch, but the watch was given and sold to JFK Jr. It's also interesting here, a lot of the papers, what's talked about is that at Arlington National Cemetery, the big flame there, that there's a vault underneath that has some papers. Interesting. In the time of JFK, there was a survey done. There was a group of men that got together, and there's some speculation about this particular book. Is it a true story, or is it a fable, or is it a book that's written about an event that they want to misdirect? But the book is called Report from Iron Mountain on the Possibility and Desirability of Peace. Introduction material by Leonard C. Lewin. And what's interesting about this book, it makes the idea, it brings about a point that, yeah, we can get to a point of peace, but then how are we going to control? How are the governments, what's the use of government if there's no wars? And what they decided, that another alternative to wars is coming up with an environmental plan to get everybody on board. So we kind of see this, there's a link to what's going on with the Green New Deal. Let's build back better. I know that's a Klaus Schwab comment, and it's also, our president has uttered those words also. But building back better, or this idea of an environmental problem, it's like the corporations, they made all this mess, all the plastic that's in the ocean, they film it, oh, isn't this terrible? And let's change everything. Global warming, whether it's global warming or global cooling, it depends on who you talk to. But they don't want to take into consideration the natural rhythm of the earth. Are we really causing so much damage? Just a question. Or is it part of this plan of getting control instead of war, controlling people through peaceful means? Peaceful, but it's really a tyranny, an economic tyranny that is put on companies and people. That's a whole other issue that I'm not going to go into right now about the coal industry and whatnot. So the question is, who's really controlling America? This book I haven't got into yet, but the DuPont dynasty. When just flipping through this book, there's a picture. It says nuclear weapons industrial complex. CIA. I just got this book this week. I have on my phone the book by the same author, very similar, by Colby, called it's about the nylon dynasty. I guess they're involved in nylon products. Maybe I got the name of that. Nylon something. I think it is Nylon Dynasty. All right, a recent read, COVID-19, The Great Reset. This book can be considered infuriating to Ospreys because it's just laid out here like they've already decided how things are going to go. No more small little businesses, just order from Amazon, basically. The changes that they're deciding, that is great for the world. The only redeeming quality of this book is it talks about creativity. And I think that they're trying to really get rid of our creativity because there's enough people out there that have really good ideas, but they're just not promoted and pushed forward. Part of what I wrote in my book, The 4 Aspects of an Astute Life, you need some love, you need support, you need some humor, and you need some excitement. I'm saying, I don't think that we want this gentleman's excitement. I find no humor in his view of the world. I don't feel connected. He's trying to separate us and have us be robots. And I don't really feel the love coming from this book. Okay, so we're gonna just turn him over. This is a new book. I'm kind of interested in researching about the Wilmington's Lie, the murderous coup of 1898 and the rise of white supremacy. Meaning, is there a group that's pulling all these type of school plays throughout history? Is this just another school play that happened in this town? I'm not sure, I haven't gone into it, but I have a friend that lives around Wilmington, so I'm going to, that's what appealed to me. And plus there's so much race baiting that's going on in the world today, and we find that they're just a bunch of school plays. There's so much lying going on, people saying that they were racially attacked, and we find out that it's a lie, just to change the narrative from something that's more important going on in the world. So as Ospreys, we are trying to neutralize the false narrative of mainstream media, right? I pulled this one out of my collection. Look at all that. I didn't realize a really close friend of mine, her husband passed recently, and I didn't realize he was in, I believe he was a Green Beret, that this was his favorite book. I didn't realize that until I started talking to my girlfriend about it. She says, yeah, we went to classes all about it. And the reason that I pulled this out is because it mentions Nixon. And there was a period of time when this gentleman, William Cooper, was told not to listen to any orders that came down through Nixon. So it kind of reminds me of what's in the news about General Milley pulling the same thing about Donald Trump. And just because something is not a law, if there is a precedent, people follow the precedent. That's why I pulled this out. I want to show this to George. Or I think I screenshotted the page and sent it to him. This book, this goes back to my more woo-woo type of life. Return of the Revolutionaries, our channeling group that's passed around, because in it has pictures of who were you in a past life. And the author, I sent him an email back in 2005 or so, just letting him know that I believe I was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, because it was told to me. So I've done some research. Can you guess who I think I might have been? And the last few books, The Art of Overcoming the New World Order, Dr. Bernie Schwartz, he was a Q follower, did a lot of videos about those type of ideas and conversations, but he has some good ideas in this book that I'm going to talk about in the book that I'm writing. I haven't gotten through this one all the way yet, but saving the Constitution. I do think that we need to have a modern conversation, what we like, what we don't like. Yes, it's a great document, but maybe it does need some updating. And I'm not saying throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but obviously there's something wrong. Americans feel that there's something wrong, that we've been overtaken or infiltrated, because simple things, common sense things, we don't see that in the news. We don't see our congressmen and senators acting in ways that really truly represent us. And so what are the threads? Where do we go wrong? Something's not right. And there are people, most of us believe, that are part of the cause of this, different organizations that they belong to, and that they might be part of a cabal or New World Order type crowd, or the phrase that everybody likes to say, deep state. Well, eventually we're going to need to reckon with some of the way that we've kind of gone off kilter, kind of bring us back to restore the republic. And maybe one way of doing this is forgiveness. I know that there was a writer and lecturer that passed away recently, Robert David Steele, and he talked about that there's many good people trapped in a bad system. He believed in truth and reconciliation. That's what's going to need to happen if we can be the astute humans that we really are, and we truly can be from the depths of our soul. A book that I suggest that maybe the next book that we write, that George writes, is War's a Racket. General Smedley D. Butler really talks about the cost of war, because as George has said and feels that we avoided perhaps the start of World War III, or the event that will take away more of our rights. Because we know that what happened on January 6th, it was not an insurrection. There were many peaceful people having a great little picnic and wanted information about the voting system. They feel that their votes weren't counted and that there's something wrong with the machines, that they are hackable, that they do not correctly count the votes. And yet this big thing was made up that there was an insurrection. And boots on the ground, the neighborhood news network was there, and they saw the same pattern, the same type of people wearing those orange hats that were there on the Capitol that day, pulling a Ukraine-style type of school play and encouraging loyal Americans to participate with them. You ever wonder why people that are involved in those things get quickly out of jail? I do. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I feel so blessed to meet so many new friends here at this charrette. And please buy George Webb's banned book bundle and learn about his lawsuit, George Webb versus CNN, and get your own mug and cups. I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to pick up one with someone's name on it, or whether you're going to be able to get one with your name on it. To be continued. Bye now.